It says adding. It's Talya. I can hear you, but I can't see you, so I think you're coming. Hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So sorry about that. I have no idea what's going on. I'm trying to walk to another spot, but even though I had plenty of so I was just talking while I was trying to connect about being flexible, right? And how that is such a good anxiety reducer in life, because life just throws so many things at us all the time and we never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So if we are not flexible, we are surely going to have anxiety and it's going to get the best of us.
Yes, I
Don't
agree.
you agree?
I agree.
Okay, so I have said lots of stuff about you that I think is wonderful in your Ayurvedic teaching and how you help women heal themselves. I need to get in a good spot. And so I want to turn it over to you now because I know you're on now time sensitive experience, but just talk to us a little bit about how you manage summer nerves and transition anxiety going into the new season, maybe how you do it yourself, any tips and tools that you use, as well as what you teach your women when you're working with them.
Yeah. So, in summer, because summer is, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but it is a fire season.
Okay.
And so for a lot of people, when we have a lot of fire in the atmosphere and we're feeling more fiery ourselves, it feels like the veil between us and the rest of the world is ultra thin. And
Wow.
so there may be anxiety present, but then there's also a lot of irritation, aggravation, and anger and resentment that can be coming up to the surface, and it's really uncomfortable. And then it kind of, if you're somebody who struggles with guilt and shame and fear, which most of us who deal with anxiety do battle with those three emotions, they're all housed in the kidneys, which is fight or flight. Then it can kind of take it even deeper, like, oh, I'm angry and now I'm making myself wrong for being angry or irritated. So what I really try to help my students understand is we want to dial the anxiety back as far as we can to core breath and core presence. So like I love what you were just saying about flexibility, because when you can breathe, you can be flexible. If you can't breathe, you're holding your right. Anxiety is like, I'm holding my breath, like I'm not even able to move anything. And so just when you let yourself breathe and tell yourself, like, this is not the biggest deal in the world.
Right.
We've also got to have some form of positive self-talk to take us down out of the tree, so to speak.
Yes.
And be like, even though this is not what I want, even though this sucks, even though I'm frustrated, I can take a breath. I'm here. I'm alive. This isn't life or death, to just really get back into that breath. And so that's Ayurveda is when you translate Ayurveda, it means science of life. And it can also be translated to mean science of the self. And that aspect of science of life, like, there's nothing really more basic than the science of breath, of bringing you immediately present into the present moment awareness of where you are and how you feel. And I think that anxiety, I mean, I'm not a therapist, as you know, but I've been in therapy for most of my adult life, so over 25 years. And I feel that anxiety and depression also, sometimes it's a cover up for these other things that we're really feeling that are maybe even harder to feel, like grief and sadness and loss and anger and fury and rage. And so while in the moment, we're just trying to get present so that we can be with what really is, then once we're there, again, the breath is again the healing tool for moving through these deeper, difficult emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And your listeners are familiar with Ayurveda too much, but most people know about Ayurveda because they hear about it when they learn yoga.
Right.
Like yoga is usually the entry point, and then you're like, oh, Ayurveda is the medicine, the science that is not necessarily deeper than yoga because they're both totally deep sciences. So I don't mean that, but where yoga is a form of breath and body care, Ayurveda is the physiology and the science and the nutrition behind it that
Sure.
supports it. But in both sciences, you know, breath is like number one. And in fact, in Ayurveda, it's really self awareness. If you don't have an ability to be self aware, how can you bring yourself into balance?
And so let me just ask you real quick. I just want to sum up what you just said because that's so powerful, and
Okay.
I love the breath, and you also mentioned positive affirmations. Although I think you said self affirmation, you said it a little differently. And those are two of the techniques that I teach in my course about exactly that, to really bring us back into that moment, but mostly specifically to allow the brain and the body to reconnect, because our brains gets into that fight or flight mode, which you mentioned already, and then it causes our bodies to react as if there's the bear chasing us, trying to eat us. And it doesn't understand that there isn't really a bear there. It just knows that we think there's a bear there, and so it acts as if. And so when we can focus on the breath and focus on those positive affirmations, which I like to teach my community even to add into their breath, like in with, even though this is really hard, out with, I can let go of the stress, even though, or I can do hard things, or I made one mistake, but I did a lot of things really well. So I love those two techniques that you mentioned already. They're so powerful. And we do need to kind of constantly remind ourselves to come back to that breath, to slow down the body's response. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, what's happening in the brain is happening in the body. And in this case, with fight or flight, it is telling the adrenal glands to secrete adrenaline, in which case the body also needs to secrete cortisol so
Yes.
that the adrenaline doesn't burn the body. Because
Right.
adrenaline is the hottest, driest hormone in the body. And we run out of cortisol, we don't have an endless supply of cortisol. And so going back to what I said about the veil feeling like it's too thin, I see this a lot in my work with clients. Is anxiety in Ayurveda is a vata issue. It's a vata imbalance. And vata is a Sanskrit word that stands for the elements of ether and air, which is basically wind, being so activated that we go into fear, anxiety, guilt, indecision. Um, you know, in terms of fight or flight, it's
Mm-hmm.
usually actually the freeze or the
Right.
flight.
Right.
Um, and that those elements of what I like to call wind, like, so when you've got a lot of wind where you're just getting more and more kind of manically in your head and not breathing, or your breathing's very shallow,
Mm-hmm.
that pushes fire to the surface. And the analogy for that is, let's say somebody's smoking a cigarette and they drop the cigarette on the floor of the forest. And it didn't start a fire, but now there's a lit cigarette on the forest floor. But now here's a big wind coming through. Just
Mm-hmm.
now we have a forest fire.
Right.
Now we have a way bigger issue. But if we go back to, like, okay, that was only an ember of fire. The real problem was the wind that came through.
Right.
So to nourish your wind, to get into your body, like, I feel like that's Ayurveda is a holistic science, just like, you know, the name of your Facebook page. I love holistic living.
Mm-hmm.
And Ayurveda is completely holistic. So everything that is mental, emotional is also physical, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which doorway you enter to start bringing yourself into balance. It's going to affect the other aspects of who you are. But I love to start with the body personally. I'm just like an earthy person.
Yeah.
And I feel like for people who are anxious, who have a lot of this vata anxiety running, they have an ease in leaving their body. And that's part of why anxiety runs them, because they so easily just go into their mind and their thoughts and their fear, and they forget their body. And so I want to like anchor these women back
Right.
and be like, no, your body is your anchor. And so even like I'm imagining somebody driving, you know, can you feel your tailbone against the seat of the chair?
Yes.
Can you feel your sitting bones on the seat of the chair? Can you feel the soles of your feet on the floor of the car, even if one foot is on the brake or the gas?
Right.
Can you be aware of your body and then track that awareness with your breath? So it's just another way to, right, that we can anchor our breath with mantras, with affirmations. We can also anchor the breath with body sensation and being present in our body.
Yes.
And this gets deepened when you bring you know, even like more self-care into your life, like making sure that you rub oil onto your body at least, you know, once a week, just to know what it feels like. Or you soak your bones in a hot bath once or twice a week, so that you know what it feels like to be warm and held and grounded. And it's something that neurologically you can go back to in a moment of stress.
I love this too, Talia. Thank you so much for talking about that grounding techniques with the body, because I know I talk to people a lot too about using all of the senses, right? So like you mentioned about feeling the car, and I love that, especially with the driving example, because the driving is a situation, or maybe you're even like sitting in a business meeting, or you're in church or something, you know, and it's a situation where you cannot leave. You can't change your environment. You can't get up and be like, okay, I need to step out and go to the bathroom and have a, you know, moment to breathe. You need to keep driving. So being
Yeah.
able to, you know, focus on like 2 things you can feel, and then maybe 2 things you can see, or 5 things you can hear, you know, using all of the senses to bring your body back in tune, to slow it down and make that brain connection between like there's actually not real danger, or we can slow this down and settle down our anxiety all by ourselves. I love that. So tell me one more tip or tool that you use personally to sort of reduce your anxiety or stress, like maybe even going into this next fall season as we transition out of summer, kind of schedules changing. I don't know how much your schedule changes, but like, you know, just shifting into this new, the days are getting shorter, things like that, weather's changing.
Well, we're not quite there yet, but I guess
No.
we are. We are truly, it's true, we are on our way there. I mean, my number one tip, honestly, is do yoga.
Okay.
Like, let, and let me say it a different way though, is I think it's very easy for women especially, and moms especially, to be like, but I have to take care of this and this and this and this, and
Right.
everybody else ends up, I mean, this is so basic. Everything I'm
Right.
saying is pretty basic, but sometimes it's like the most basic stuff is what we need to be reminded of. And the idea that self-care is not selfish,
Right.
that it's actually self-preservation, because nothing will wear away at you faster and more dramatically than constantly being under stress, which is anxiety.
Yep.
And so if you don't have, you need, I want everyone who's listening to this to be like, hear this, you know, whatever you do, and it has to be a minimum of 3 times a week at a minimum, you need to have something that you do that is just for you, just for you. And if it also gets you to open up your body or feel your body and invite in those 5 senses, Like for some people, it could be taking themselves out to dinner and just totally giving themselves like an entire hour to eat this meal with complete sensual presence. And all they're doing is awakening their senses of sight, smell, and taste. And for
I
me,
totally agree.
you know,
Yeah, and I talk about that too.
it's
About
yoga.
Yeah, yoga's amazing. I love
It's
yoga as
quiet.
well. You're
It's
so
quiet.
great.
I don't do the one where they play music.
Mine
I
is
don't
quiet.
go.
Oh, mine plays music. Mine plays music.
Well, it's whatever floats your boat. For me, I want silence.
Yeah.
For me, I want as close to nature as I can get. I want silence. I want to move slowly. So I don't go to like really fast moving yoga either. I go to a yoga that is slow and that's going to meet my already tendency to go fast with my brain.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's going to meet me and be like, no, no, no. This is your time to slow down and do like supported poses. So supporting your head in a forward bend. A lot of this can be found in a class like a yin yoga class or a gentle yoga class, restorative yoga class, or an Iyengar class.
Okay.
So just I want to make sure I put those words out there because there's a lot of different schools of yoga. And according to Ayurveda, not all yoga is equal. They all have a different impact on our bodies and our brains. And so you want to make sure that you're practicing the right yoga for you at the time when you need it. So we're talking about anxiety and especially summer nerves. And in Ayurveda, the thing that somebody's got summer nerves going on, they need to cool, they need to open, and they need to slow down.
Okay.
So that's definitely going to be a yin yoga class, a gentle yoga class, a restorative yoga class, or an Iyengar yoga class that is focused on more restorative therapeutic poses versus a yoga class that you're going to work out and sweat or that moves really fast or that incorporates, Pilates or
like
something else that get you into your brain of like, my body's not perfect or I need to lose 10 pounds. Like just want to not just, you need to find things that just like, you're not thinking about those things.
Right.
You need to have an hour or an hour and a half, 3 times a week where you are just, for some people it's surfing or riding a horse.
Right.
I mean, self-care or walking their dog on the beach.
It's so personal too, and I love what you said about self-care is not selfish. I say that all the time to my clients and to myself even, and it also isn't only about manicures and massages. Self-care can be like, for me, I think honestly it's that morning meditation time, right? That morning, like literally 5 to 10 minutes of just quiet coffee, like read my little morning reading, spend a few minutes in quiet time because it might be all I get all day. It might just mean like coffee with a friend or just taking a run or going to the gym or whatever. It doesn't have to be a long thing either. Like if you can't fit in a whole yoga class, then just do something gentle at home, sit quietly and read your book or
but I have to challenge that. If you can't fit in an hour and a half for yourself 3 times a week, you have a bigger problem.
Yeah, I agree.
That's not a lot of time. There are 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. I'm talking about 4.5 hours a week minimum.
Yeah, I agree.
And we all need to look at that. We all need to look at where we tell ourselves we can't give that to ourselves. It's bullshit. It's just something to figure out.
Yeah.
Which goes back to the
priorities.
Which goes back to flexibility.
You and I are both very busy people. We're running businesses. I mean, I have a bunch of kids and a husband to try to manage, and it's all about priorities, right? So we all have the same 24 hours in a day, but it depends on what we make as our priority. And for me personally, exercise is a huge priority. So I always make time for that in my life. It's in different forms. It's not only yoga, and also connection with my friends is really important. So I really make a priority to try to it might just be 30 minutes for coffee, but I have to connect with people because I have an isolating job. So I'm by myself a lot. And
totally
to get out and connect with somebody and have that minute to just be like, hey, there's life out there. What are you doing? And have somebody listen to me and me listen to them and share that experience.
And I love that for anxiety too. I think I'm, you know, so the quality I'm talking about from an Ayurvedic perspective, that Vata quality, um, and I don't want to get too into this because I know it's
Yeah.
a detail, but people who run a lot of Vata are very sensitive people. They're highly sensitive people, and they need people to talk to. They need people to witness them and to hold them and to reflect back to them like, no, you're okay. So I love what you're bringing forward about relationships and girlfriends and communication and prioritizing that. And you know, you need to make sure that you're doing it with really safe people. And you're
Absolutely.
not making plans with people just to make plans, but you're making plans with people who, when you're done, even if you had a conflict or something come up, it's someone that you feel safe with and that you can talk to about that later.
Right.
That's so important for people who run anxiety.
I totally agree. And that's a whole nother conversation around
Yeah,
like relationships and what that looks like and boundaries and weeding out toxicity in your life. We could talk a whole nother hour about that. But
I know.
yeah, I love the tips that you have brought up to attention today about transitioning into the new season and summer nerves. I really appreciate your expertise around Ayurveda and yoga. I know that my audience is going to appreciate that as well.
Oh,
So thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for managing through the technology issues that we had in the beginning. We persevered and we were flexible, and we made it happen.
yeah.
Yes, girl, I love it. So thank you again for being with me, and I will look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Shelby.
You have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.